Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Once again, this week we're in Reykjavik, Iceland, the epicenter, ground zero, the fighting front in the war of national independence, dignity, and economic development against supranational, oligarchical, elitist institutions attempting to impose the yoke of usury and debt upon the world. Now, let's hear from the Icelandic side. I'm joined here in Reykjavik by Þórarinn Einarsson, who is one of the leading activists. He was part of this magnificent mass strike process, which occurred here in Reykjavik in the form of meetings and demonstrations, especially during the months of November, December, and January of 2008 into 2009. We were just at the Parliament yesterday, the Althing, in some accounts the oldest parliament in the world, opened, and we had the biggest demonstration ever for the opening of the Althing. But let's let Þórarinn tell the story in his own way, as seen from Iceland, and fill you in about what you need to know.
Yes, hello. My name is Þórarinn Einarsson, and I want to preview about the situation in Iceland. It's been exactly 1 year now this week when this crisis here in Iceland started, and was mainly we had three very huge banks, and they a few years ago they had been privatized, and they overgrew about the size of 10 times the GDP. And they were mainly financed on short-term loans. They were very relied on getting these kind of loans, and they just they borrowed like there was no tomorrow, and it was very risky business. And of course, they thought they would just always get these loans and they could expand it forever. Very irresponsible. But then they started to get some no's. They didn't. It was difficult to get these loans. Started to get difficult, and so they get the brilliant idea to open deposit accounts in Europe. So they start to use the money of the common people in Europe. And of course, they promised very high interest. And at that time, the interest rate was growing very fast in Iceland. It was because of it was so inflationary, our economy, and the central bank, they had the silly policies who thought they could control the inflation and just raising the interest rate. But the banks actually used that to fool the Europeans to for high interest deposit accounts, and so they sucked in a lot of money from the Europeans. And actually, we still don't know today what really happened to this money. It was just kind of stolen from the European people. But so 1 year ago, it was evident that the banks were having problems. They could not, pay some loan on debt, and it started to crumble. There was a lot of panic, and they were demanding loans. Of course, they had huge assets, but the really thing was that they didn't have the currency. They had a lot of krona, the Icelandic currency, but they didn't have really foreign currency, actual currency to pay these loans. So they were desperate. They went to the central bank, and he was David Oddsson, and he was also giving both loans and also saying no, and he was desperate, didn't know what was the right choice. But anyway, in the end, in just 2 days, all of these three banks, they were nationalized, and it was security laws in Iceland that would ensure the deposit accounts of all Icelanders, or people within Iceland, but not for other branches that were actually in Europe. So Icelanders basically kept their money system going. People having still their money, losing something, but the people in Europe that has especially what is called the ISAFE in Landsbanki, they did not get their money. Eventually, others got their money from the two other banks. But this was became the dispute between Iceland and the UK and Netherlands. But together about $6 billion that was arranged as a political solution as what Iceland should pay instead of paying the whole thing. That would be about 2 times that. And but this is anyway very unfair and probably impossible for the Icelandic people because these were private banks, and so the common Icelanders would say it had nothing to do with that. The thing is that they were nationalized in the end, and so the debts and liabilities of these banks, they came into the heads of the common Icelanders. Of course, there was a huge responsibility for all the politicians, the government at that time, but it was amazing, the denial and the irresponsibility and how naive these politicians were actually, and the bankers, central bank, and surveillance, and no one resigned, not one person. And that was what outraged, really, the population. I mean, some people didn't even care about there was a crisis. The main thing is that no one was taking political accountability. That was just too much for people. And so eventually they start to protest very heavily. And in few months, it was always getting more intensified. And eventually, in January, actually it was the date of 6th of October is like the starting date for the crisis in Iceland in 2008. But it was not until in January when the protests kept so intense that the Social Democrats, who were in government in the coalition with the Independence Party, they kind of broke down, or they couldn't face their nation anymore with the protests getting violent. So they ended this government, and they decided that we should have an election. And as a result, we got after the election, we had some shifts in the power structure that only though resulted in left-wing government. So everybody was quite happy with it. Later, very disappointed. And this government is, of course, no better than the former. Now it's being mainly the Social Democrats ruling, and they just want to join the European Union, seeing it as a magic solution for all our problems. And but of course, that's a very simplified and naive view, like we know with the Social Democrats, especially here in Iceland, that they seem very blocked and naive towards the International Monetary Fund. They really think that they are here to try to help us, and we just have to face their conditions and policies. But this is, of course, really no exception from other stories of the IMF, and now we really need to get rid of it. I think people are realizing here in Iceland more than ever before how these institutions really work, and people are starting more to demand that the IMF should be kicked out of the country, and also the population is against joining the European Union, even if this coalition had decided to apply for membership and see how would it go, the negotiations, if it will be good for Iceland to join, and that will be decided in a referendum here in Iceland. But still, the population in Iceland is even more opposed here after how the EU has treated us in a very bad way.